Now, on today's video, we're going to take some of the BMW HP2 Sport parts. They're ready for the clear. Some are ready for the second coat of clear. Some are ready for more clear, but it's basically going to be clear. I want to get the clear on the MV Augusta test for the F4, the silver paint. This way, the next time Vlad is in the shop here, and he may be here in the next couple of days, he can pick the sample up of the silver test part. He can check out, we have one valve cover already buffed out. I still haven't had time to do the second one because I wanted to get the clear coating on a day like today. The wind wasn't terrible out there. We had no sun at all. It looked like it was going to snow any minute. In fact, it's supposed to snow later this afternoon, but I did get the clear on. This video is V7. The V indicates it's Vlad's 3 projects that we're working on all at the same time. And so if people that are new subscribers want to go back and see V5 or 4 or 10 or whatever, you can kind of keep them in order. Anyway, they're expecting snow later today, so my goal is I have a couple little parts I want to get clear on, get them out here in the garage drying, and then if I do have any time left over, I have some parts ready to buff. So I always have something in the pipeline, something ready to spray, something ready to buff, something ready to sand. The reason for that is we're prisoners of the weather here. You never know from day to day. In the time we're working on this project, we've had snow, we've had rain, we've had freezing, and we've had nice days. So working around the weather is always challenging. When it's 40, I always like to paint if it's above 40. It just went up above 40 before I started today. And some of the parts are ready for their second or third coat. Some are ready for buffing. We always have parts ready for the next step. So because I have a day that's relatively good for painting, there's no real wind out there now. So now let me just make a thing. I buffed this part out yesterday. I still have to buff the second part out, but I don't want to buff things out when I could be painting. Now, the 2 Buell fairings are ready for clear on a day that the wind isn't blowing. So if the wind isn't blowing, after we do the BMW parts, I'll get some clear on them. See, what I'm trying to show is, and this is a part that's sanded out and ready for clear. I'm trying to explain how I schedule this all out. And I always try to have some parts, so when a great day for clear comes, I have parts sanded. And then when it's a day that's raining or snowing, or we don't know what's going to be later, I do the buffing. So just having a little, I call it sequencing, really not the right word, but the next thing in line, and Vlad always tells me what he wants next, is the front fender of the BMW. So this had a little touch up in the front here. I already touched it up. He got this the white, and this is ready for some clear. And then we want to see if we can't blend that in. Well, we're going to see. I think it's going to get buried in clear in a couple of coats. And before we buff it out, of course, we'll make sure that little tip, that's there was a little chip in the paint there, but we'll blend that right in. So let me go mix up some clear and get this day on the road. Now, if when I'm all done with this fender, I can still see that little repair, the only other choice I'm going to have is to spray the whole white over, and luckily Vlad brought enough paint, so we'll see at the end of the day if that's going to need the white resprayed, not a big deal, and we have the Augusta test parts. And anytime I use my compressor, I bleed with the valve at the bottom, rock the compressor, now shut the valve, let it build up pressure. That's a really good tip. And we're going to use Gavco. We just got a fresh gallon of this down at good old Gavin's. And always fun going down there. And we're going to use a Harbor Freight gun. The tip will be cleaned before we put it together. And we'll be ready to paint. Now the last thing, Sikkens M600. I want to wipe the part, clean it, get any little detail that's still there. Actually, the white still has some funny spots. It's like the paint is thinner in spots. I don't know if we're going to get away with this. I guess we're going to find out. Or we'll just paint that white the next session. But I want to give it a shot. I had to make up some little bolts, little holders for this. Every one of these parts is difficult to hold and then hang up without putting a scratch in it. And what I usually do is with a bolt and an old pair of vice grip pliers. You can see those pliers have a lot of paint on them. Everything in this workshop it's a working workshop, that's for sure. Now, I always keep the tip of the gun, especially the clear gun, more than anything else, because these big guns, the bigger guns, have little tiny, 8 little tiny holes, and this helps give you a much nicer spray pattern. So the first part of mixing the 4-to-1 mix, is the good idea is don't talk to anybody or don't get distracted so you can keep track of the 4-to-1 ratio. And I have gotten it. I've tried a couple of times to make it 5-to-1 or for whatever reason, or 3-to-1. It never works better than 4-to-1. So I try to keep that as accurate as I can. I always like to put some blue tape around the top of any gun I use. Even the ones that don't leak, then all of a sudden one day they leak, and I don't know why. But these guns are so inexpensive. And part of what I do, now this I'm just spraying some acetone through it, make sure I clean it up, fine tune it. If anything, let it spray like a big airbrush. Now, I like to start the gun not on the part. And anytime I'm going to release the trigger, I take it off the part. And that, I'm putting this in real time. This is the only one. I'll put the rest in fast forward. A lot of people start the job by putting the gun facing the part and pulling the trigger, and you get always a chance you're going to get a little bit of the paint that sticks to the tip. It's just better to spray midair, then bring the part on board. Looking at this in real time now, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Very low pressure, the lowest pressure you can make the gun paint like an airbrush. Now, in my case, you couldn't paint a car this way, realistically, but all of the parts we paint are relatively small. So the extra time this takes, and let's say it takes an extra 15, 20 minutes to go back and forth and back. Now, see, I did it again. Take the part, put the gun away from the part, spray, and then move your hand or whatever you have to do, and then start it out in midair. If you build up that as a habit, that really works to your advantage. And it'll only spit every once in a while. I'm not sure if you have a $1,500 spray gun, it won't do that. But I know I've gotten used to using very inexpensive equipment, and I get good results with it, so I don't see any reason to spend a lot more money. And it's always, in my case, I'd rather buy more tires and put more miles on the bike, because the whole reason for doing all of this is I want to ride the bike. So this gives you an idea how many coats, but keep in mind, these are thin coats. This is not, if you do that with the regular, like you were painting a car, the regular settings, you're not going to be a happy day. Now, part is drying up pretty well. It's a little over 40 degrees today. That should dry up out there in a matter of 45 minutes or an hour, and we'll put the second coat on. But for right now, I wanted to take the time. This is the MV Augusta silver. That silver will change color when we put the clear on it. So that'll give Vlad an accurate look at what that's going to be. And again, that's for a brand new F4 that Vlad's got in his collection. He wants that paint to match. Now, the reason we're being so fussy and doing paint tests on this silver paint, because this is a color right paint, should match real good. But again, Vlad wants to be, he's about as fussy as I am. I wanted to see it out in fluorescent light, and I wanted to look at it out in the sun both. I put it under fluorescent light, and it looks a little bit different. But again, when I mixed the paint for the silver wheels, I mixed that with my own pigment. So we do have a chance here. If he's not happy, we can kind of, I call it tinting, but we can modify this to some degree. But if it's wrong, and I'll be very surprised. See, you spray that in midair. Didn't want to change the subject, but spray the part, spray the part, spray the part. When you're done, put it off in midair, and then let the trigger go. And that works for me. That works so well. I try to, all the people that have learned how to paint in my cellar, both model planes and, of course, motorcycling, and I try to give that little tip to them. That little tip can make your day complete. A lot less chance you get a run when you do it that way, too. Although, even if you get a run, it's just a little more work to get it out. But this part now is on the dashboard. This is a part you'll see, a focal part right on the top of the motorcycle. The sun is going to hit this from every angle. We want to get this absolutely piece of jewelry. Now, over the course of the day, and I gave it about in this case it was cold, about an hour between coats. I did get 2 full coats on all the parts, the fender, this, and the MV test. But I could see we were losing the weather minute by minute here, and it did. I just ducked in under the weather at the end of the day. It was good because I hate to not finish up the parts. Now what this allows me to do is these parts now can sit in the garage. They usually would sit there 2 days in relatively cold weather. Then I'll bring them down and put them by a heating vent. That'll get me one more step further ahead on that. And once the parts have, I call it cured, but they've sat. Now this is what the part looks like as it's drying. You can see that's some pretty nice stuff. But it's in my favor to let it dry an extra day or two. So the way the day played out, by the end of the day, I had gotten some clear on, extra coat of clear on the hugger. That was important. I want plenty of clear on there when I get to do the buffing. I wanted to do the Buell side fairing, but the weather, I was losing the weather minute by minute, and right at the end I thought, oh boy, I don't want to be painting a fairing and have the first raindrop or snowflake fall on it. But it was a very satisfying day getting this clear on. This is of course going to sit, and just, I call it curing, but that's really not the right word. But these parts pretty much are going to be ready to buff, and the longer, it's a good trick too, the longer you let them sit, the easier it'll be to buff. So the day played out well. Everything is up dry in here, and I don't know how the weather's going to be tomorrow when we wake up, but we're definitely going to see. We've got enough clear on parts now that we'll have plenty of buffing if it's a crappy day. And if it turns out to be a day without any wind, we'll get those Buell parts, the fairing sides, at least get one coat of clear or 2 coats of clear on them. We're always a prisoner of the weather, that's for sure. But we did get something done today, and every time I look around, there's more parts off of that table. And at the end of every day, I like to just look around at the parts that are yet to be done. This is 3 full motorcycle restorations here, including that Moto Guzzi, which we may not even get to by the end of the year. I don't know, because every part on this BMW is, these carbon fiber parts are very, very labor intensive to get them to look like that valve cover. And there's some parts to the Moto Guzzi, I know some unique parts. Vlad had some parts actually for the seat that I'm not even sure we're gonna be able to do it the way he wants. That's a whole nother project. I'm trying not to think about the Moto Guzzi yet, because actually the BMW, when I can get the BMW done and he can get the bike put back together, then we're going to move on to the Buell full time. And those carbon fiber parts that came from Europe, they are some super, super nice parts. I want to put the finish on them that I'll be really happy about. And when Vlad goes to the shows or to hang out with his buddies, they're going to oogle his bike and think he's a cool guy. And then he'll probably tell everybody that he painted it himself. Not really. Anyway, we do enjoy the restoration of older motorcycles. We enjoy the interaction with our friends. I enjoy my collection. And every day that I stay busy, I always think it's a better chance I'll live a better life. And thanks so much for watching.